A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Meaning of Life. When it comes to diseases, more and more people are thinking about whether they want to rely on classic pharmaceuticals or alternative methods. Today we will examine both topics. My guest is Josua Kohberg, neuroscientist. Stay tuned. Hello Josua, welcome.
Hello Rolf.
Well, there are good arguments for both sides, for pharmaceuticals and for alternative healing methods. In your opinion, what is the classic weakness in the pharmaceutical industry?
So I want to start by saying, as you just mentioned, I'm not a doctor. I come from neuroscience, from cognitive neuroscience, and I would like to say beforehand that everything really has its place on this planet, including the pharmaceutical industry. If asked what would be the classic problem with that, I would say the same classification as religion. That means the pharmaceutical industry has a claim to absolution and says we are the ones who are right. And when someone comes up with something alternative, like acupuncture 30 years ago, then it just has to be bullshit. And I actually think that's the biggest issue in the pharmaceutical sector, because in classical medicine, in the pharmaceutical industry, there is just one approach and it's materialistic. So that means there's something missing. And I don't want to be misunderstood. When I have a car accident and a broken leg or I'm lying around with a torn leg, then I really wish I had a general practitioner who can patch me up again, who knows his trade. I wouldn't want to be treated with globules then, that's logical. The crux of the matter is, if you just look at the path, how do materially expressed complaints in the body come about? Then there is a lot before that is simply disregarded in pharmaceuticals. And there are many reasons why they disregard that.
One could perhaps put it this way, that there is a lack of tolerance versus the alternative healing methods, or acceptance.
I'm a bit more provocative than Rolf. I say that what makes money usually wins out, and of course pharma is simply a wonderful module. You can administer things and you can provide people with small pills for years, decades, that you can do in an extraordinary way. For example, you can also protect patents on this planet, which another company cannot. These are playgrounds where I say, okay, in the final analysis it should somehow be about money. That's an assumption on my part, but I'll throw it out there. Of course, that can't be done with classic. I'm now really consciously calling it classic therapy methods that we have known for thousands of years. Let's just take the Chinese emperor. I have a very close connection to traditional Chinese medicine because one of my longest-standing business partners, Professor Ba, brought acupuncture to Europe with Noshi, and they were almost crucified for it in the beginning. Today he has 2 professorships. Professor Ba is a highly respected man. It is covered by the health insurance companies. So just on the subject, something changes in perception. But if you take this Chinese emperor, who had a range of doctors in earlier times, and it was the doctor's job to make sure he didn't get sick. If he got sick, he first had someone beheaded. That was the consequence in the medical team. If I look at it from today's perspective, then from my point of view, we have, and that is also a major weakness in the whole pharmaceutical concept, we simply have a completely wrong approach. It's an approach that we're doing physically that nobody, really nobody, would do with their car. If someone takes care of their car, then they keep looking at it, do an inspection, do this, do that, just to keep this thing running. Today we have the approach, oh pity, unfortunately, you now have a problem in your intestines, now we have to refer you to hospital and see that we can get you fit again. From a brain point of view, this is just completely strange behavior. Our brains like to spend energy keeping things going, not fixing things that are already broken. That's not ideal.
So also prevention, which is given with alternative healing methods or even preventive measures. That's something with the pharmaceutical approach, which is actually less taken into account, seeing the person as a whole and working preventively. We then have a third player, academic medicine. To what extent does academic medicine include the self-healing powers or preventive measures today?
I think it's coming slowly but surely. You always have to say that if you look at it from this area of cognitive science, then we are actually talking about philosophical approaches. Neuroscience starts somewhere with Descartes asking, who am I? Where am I? Am I out there? Am I in there? Those are all unanswered questions. The entire brain research is actually still, at least that was my summary of my studies, that I went out there after 3.5 years and asked myself, okay, what do I really know now? Actually, the perception of apparent facts has changed again and again every 6 months. And I see that in academic medicine, too. So we're getting more and more behind it. I was totally hooked now that I recently got an insight into a study in Rorschacherberg, which was conducted in Munich, where people during general anesthesia simply put on headphones in the operating room, were provided with classical, 60 beats per minute music and affirmations, very classic. 25 years ago, so my area of research is hearing through the skin, and it was also about the question of how I can unconsciously perceive something. I then did EEGs, back in 2001, with 32-channel EEGs, so very simple methods compared to what we have today, and have shown that the Wernicke and the Broca area are activated when I hear something unconsciously. And that was a no-go. So everyone said to the research result, what nonsense, it's charlatanry, you can sell in the esoteric scene. Today we are so far. I have also scientifically substantiated everything. We work together with Mainz and Frankfurt, with large universities, but this study in Grosshaden, which simply shows that the painkillers could be reduced, which in addition to the painkilling effect mean a massive intervention in the organism. In the long term, I have to get the stuff out of my body somehow. So I have reduced painkillers, I have faster healing effects, and they have now proven that with a few thousand patients. We're just talking about headphones during surgery. And that's what alternative therapists preached 40, 50 years ago. And I have to say that a lot of people just have to admit that they don't take these things seriously. And that is negligent. As a doctor, like I said, I really appreciate all doctors, they often do their best, but the training system is completely rigid and goes in a direction, they don't get the right information at all, and they took an oath. An oath for human life. And I just have to say, sorry folks, you have to take a look at what's possible there. And ultimately it is the business model, but it ends up in an industry and not with the researchers. If we had it like in the automotive industry, then we would have a completely different level in medicine, because then people would say, okay, I'll pay 100,000 for a Porsche, I'll pay 100,000 for optimal treatment, and then I really want the creme de la creme of everything. And that's a topic, we have a little plastic card, you can go there and you'll be prescribed a pill. We have created a system that cannibalizes itself.
Yes, those are such harsh words. But also a word for the alternative method, just to take that into account. So the doctors, they work to the best of their knowledge and belief, but you mentioned the training system leaves the best knowledge and goes in a certain direction, and maybe it takes a bit of self-initiative, to become active there. But you can already see it increasingly that they also work overlapping with alternative therapists. And are there certain diseases in this area that are better for alternative approaches than others?
It's actually absolutely simple to get to the point. Anything psychosomatic in any way. Again, a manifest physical illness, a material form of illness, I treat it of course with materialistic approaches. So that means I have an illness where I can cut something out to reduce a focus of inflammation, for example. That is logical. And that's where we have a brilliance today, where we've really come a long way in the field of medical devices and so on. Just the question, which I think very few people ask, what do I do before and after? I'll just take an example. We have very, very interesting research areas which, like acupuncture 30 years ago, are not recognized today. We have areas where we can say, let's take an example, breast cancer is a care conflict. So that means there are studies that just aren't validated enough to say, I can now put a hardcore stamp on them, but which show very, very clear tendencies. A woman loses a child or partnership. A certain form of cancer results from this topic. We know, for example, that lung problems are extremely linked to the fear of death. Now I look at what we have done with Corona over many months. We created fear. We have a lot of big concerns. What will happen to us in general? And what is the result? These are also lung problems. Now, of course, you can say that maybe it's just a virus, but if I look at it more holistically, I would kind of go into a loop and say, okay, the real power in our lives is in the spirit. There is a saying that my brain is the most important organ. Until now I realize who said it, namely my brain. But in fact it is. The brain just has this power to manifest. Each of us has experienced that. I imagine a wonderful vacation, for example. And then it takes a year or 2 or 3, but if the imagination is strong enough, I will experience this holiday. Unfortunately, that is only one side today. I'm imagining what this fear is doing to me when I'm half dead. And I'll be half dead. And that's a topic that I'm of the opinion, if I'm really just saying that as a neuroscientist, I'm not even talking about alternative therapies here. I'm just saying, what do we need to look at medically, as to the power of this organ? Because the brain controls the autonomic nervous system. The brainstem controls emotions. And there are a lot of levers in there. I'll just say an example. A doctor who diagnoses a patient and says, I'm really very sorry, but this will end fatally. To put it very harshly. Or they say, look, we've made this diagnosis before. And I know, if they really know it that way, I personally know 5 people who are still alive today despite the diagnosis. What is happening in my emotional level now? And that's just communication. Any doctor could learn this in their undergraduate studies. Any teacher could learn that. There are thousands of areas of application that I, as a cognitive neuroscientist, would actually recommend to everyone to use urgently.
I think that with statements like this you set an attitude or a conditioning that then fulfills itself. On the other hand, someone might be scared if they say you'll survive this anyway. I know, we've had a couple of times that they promise too much and then have to fear legal consequences again. But basically, I would like to turn to the topic of self-healing powers. Can we use the self-healing powers precisely through such statements, which are at the beginning? In the end, it probably has to lead to a conviction. We can activate the self-healing powers in this way.
Absolutely, it's even easier. On the one hand, you have this conscious level, but there are also methods. We've been researching for over 20 years on the subject of voice. And for example, meditations. So in India, it is very common that I heal through sound. It's just a bit strange for us when some guy comes and puts a bowl on your stomach and then stirs it and says, hey, this is singing bowl therapy. The crux of the matter is that I have to consult Western science again. We do a lot with EEG measurements, HRV measurements. We measure the parasympathetic nervous system via HRV, so tension, relaxation. And there I can show exactly how frequencies that I hear, that I just hear, or even better sound myself. That's just, in India there are some mantras that are sung there, where a European then says, what kind of nonsense is that? Only point is, I can show that metrologically, that after the 8th of October minutes the energy in the body is balanced. And then when I understand, again coupled to a Chinese medicine, that an illness is simply the blocked energy in some area, now I can stick a needle, I can do acupressure, I can tone. There's so many things we can just do to get energy flowing. And when I then get an idea of this energy, which I can also feel, this energy in some way affects my body, then it becomes clear, energy blocked, body blocked, material illness. So, now of course I can say, okay, material illness, now I'll take a pill for it or I cut something. If it's bad enough, it makes perfect sense, and then the energy flow reverses. But why not? Sure, you can't make that much money with it, but why not start the other way around? Why not get energy flowing and prevent material congestion? Well, that's just a logical consequence, but every human being, and I think that's the cool thing about our time, that we have many, many people who are realizing more and more that they are actually responsible. So handing in the plastic card to the doctor is one option, but to say, okay, do I have to have it like this? Or maybe I'll consider living like the Emperor of China beforehand and see if I can stay healthy.
Yes, that's the topic of prevention on the one hand, and that requires a certain level of commitment, activity and interest, to not just say, if it doesn't work anymore, I'll go to the doctor, but the prevention and then also the self-healing power. Do we underestimate this power of self-healing?
Extremely. So I'm 100% convinced that all of us, really all of us, completely underestimate it. I've been to India several times and I've seen things where it is said that it actually does not fit to our understanding of the world. That people use their heartbeat, so someone sits there and gets their heartbeat up and down to a standstill. Someone only heats part of their body. I actually experienced it myself live, how someone raised an arm temperature, so an extremity, to 45 degrees, where you say, okay, it can't work. How is it supposed to work? I have no explanation for it either, I have to say that clearly. But in fact it is power that dwells within us. And what I can only say from my experience is that if I find something positive, then I live differently. That means I look at something and maybe I have a bad situation, but I still see it as positive within the scope of my possibilities, then I change energy. And every viewer can understand that for themselves, because each of us has done it hundreds of times, whether positively or negatively. And that's why I think it's massively underestimated.
And if I go ahead and give it a chance, because I'm already quite convinced, are there any natural possibilities how I can strengthen my self-healing powers and then just check it out and so slowly build up my trust?
Stärken kann und das dann eben auch gerade überprüfen kann und so langsam ein Vertrauen aufbauen kann.
That's also the European or Western approach. But then I have to have proof before and after. I'm with you too. I feel the same way, so that we understand each other correctly. But it's actually like that. The easiest way is to start with something like that, really using relaxation exercises as a tool. I can do whatever I want there. I can listen to classical music, use meditations, or I can just meditate in silence. And if you would like to have proof, I really recommend an HRV measurement. That means heart rate variability. There are now products in the range of 50 to 100 euros. For example, I'm wearing a ring for that here. This measures the heart rate variability. It always tells me how tense and how relaxed I am. Am I in balance? And just relaxing isn't good either. You should also tense up and move and so on. It's about the balance in between. Well, I love HRV because it's just a very, very scientifically based method. Conventional doctors also work with it. A lot is done with it in sport. It's just a great method. And then I can measure, does a daily relaxation of 15 minutes bring me to the point where I find myself? That's so nice too. I find myself. I somehow live here in this body with the most important person in my life and never get to me. That's a pity. So when I get to know myself a bit better, when I settle down a bit, when I calm down, then what I can do via the body, and what I'm saying is a bit mean, but unfortunately I have to say it, again from the perspective of neuroscience, the body is just a cool measuring instrument. You can check your body immediately, how are you actually? And then I can measure. How does this help me? And if I then notice that it will help me, that I have had a positive experience, then I might go one step further and one step further. And so maybe I'll develop a lifestyle for myself which, in the best case scenario, will let me die healthy.
Well, on the subject of HRV, I know it from sport too. The nice thing is that you get immediate feedback and it is basically a diagnostic tool. And to that extent, conventional medicine also uses many diagnostic instruments, and somehow a combination of these things would actually be desirable. And the nice thing about HRV is that I don't have to go to the doctor, I can do it myself, at home. But just one more question, how do I find myself? We know meditation people and those who don't like it so much. I can't meditate, I have to concentrate, and then it's probably just not the effect. Are there simple exercises to activate the parasympathetic nervous system?
Well, I actually always recommend non-verbal things. There are a lot of meditations. I've also published over 100 of such trainings as an author. That's all good, so I don't want to judge this in any way. When you feel it's easier if you're taken through a process when you listen to someone, that's wonderful. But in my opinion, the optimum way to really get in touch with yourself is a non-verbal exercise, for example just making a sound or humming. So you can hum your own tune, so just sit down or stand, depending on what feels better for me, and then just hum for 10 or 12 minutes. Just a tone, completely unspectacular.
Whatever's coming out.
Exactly, whatever's coming out. You can then continue with that. You can really train that in a targeted way with a basic tone exercise or something. But actually just humming and seeing what actually comes out of me. Because I can't get in without knowing what's coming out of me. So that's a very logical effect. I just create a feeling for myself. And there again may be a little warning or a little hint. Warning is the wrong word, rather a hint. Each of us has our skeletons in the closet. One is overweight, the other has relationship problems, the third has no money, the fourth is addicted to gambling or something, it doesn't matter at all. Everything that we live and experience in this way are behavior patterns. And when I find myself, I start to recognize my patterns. And that's really funny.
So I go into resonance with myself. That's how I understand it now. I go into resonant vibration through humming, through tones, through vibration, and then recognize my patterns. This is actually comparable to what is aimed at in meditation.
Exactly. And we even put it that way in the vernacular. But you're really beside himself or you're really out of tune. You can imagine it like this. So here I stand, but emotionally I'm here. So I am beside myself. I can't even perceive what kind of pattern I live. And it's a point of view, but I got there through my studies. From my worldview, we are actually talking about a pure, conditioned pattern in various forms. I put it a little mean. We are actually computers. Our brain only works in 0 to 1 codes. When we hear something, when we see something, we actually have no perception. We do hear German, but it is a sound wave that is decoupled in the inner ear, and via the auditory nerve a 0 to 1 coding goes to the brain.
Analog perception, digitization on the way to the brain.
And the cool thing is that something phenomenal happens in the brain. There's suddenly this 0 to 1, this digital signal, something is teased, what we call memory. We now remember German. That's why we can talk in German or Swiss. The only point is, if I don't remember Chinese or Spanish, then I can't produce it at all. Then I hear something, but I have no memory. And that's exactly the same in the realm of this personality. When I'm beside myself, I don't even realize I'm working in patterns. If I at least know that I'm drinking too much alcohol, or that I'm under too much stress, or that I'm addicted to gambling, at least then I can see a pattern. When I'm beside myself, I still think it's normal and I believe that's real life. A pity.
Yes, we can just leave it at that. Yes, curiosity is piqued. Where can we get more information to deepen your explanations?
I would actually recommend a website from a company that also sells my products, so kosystem.de. As I said, my area of research is passive, unconscious hearing through the skin. Very interesting to use, especially in the health sector. We also have 800, 900 doctors working with us in the meantime. You can find something exciting there, or even worse, for example. This topic, voice image, and so on. You spell that WOOYCE or just Google my name, Josua Kohberg, then you will find a lot.
All right. Thank you for this information and thank you for being here, dear Josua.
My pleasure.
Dear viewers, I hope we were able to awaken your interest in trying one thing or the other when you are beside yourself, to find yourself, to go into resonance with yourself. Good example with the humming. It's easy. Just choose the frequency that your voice just produced, that's just coming out, and see what happens. Thank you for your interest and see you again soon. Until then, I look forward to it.